This is my video for the Red Oktober Kalashnikov Championship held October 6th to 7th, 2018 at the Southern Utah Practical Shooting Range. For this event, I borrowed an AK-47 from Lee Armory. This particular rifle featured a Magpul Zhukov stock and grip, an Ultimac rail, which I mounted a Vortex Optics Crossfire Red Dot to, and an ALG trigger. Aside from the muzzle brake, there are no other competition-specific features on this rifle, and it is representative of what a modern fighting AK rifle could be. X-Tech Tactical provided me with a number of their new polymer AK-47 magazines, and Xander Sporting Goods provided me with bare ammunition. Both of these companies did this in support of my coverage on Breach Bang Clear of this event. I competed in Armored Division, which requires wearing front and rear rifle-rated armored plates, and Trooper Category, which requires carrying all my ammunition on my person throughout every stage of the match. As usual, I wore my Faro Concepts Slickster plate carrier with United Armory steel plates, and I wore my Whiskey 24 Practical Integrated Modular Platform System to carry all of my magazines and loose ammunition. Armored Division is basically open division with plates. Going into this, I knew I would be handicapped using 7.62x39 with 30-round magazines against other shooters using 5.45 and 5.56 rifles with 40 or 45-round magazines. Nonetheless, I wanted to see how I would perform with this rifle and caliber combination. If I'm picking up an AK, it has to bring something to the table over using an AR-15. And using 7.62x39 does provide barrier penetration and stopping power that sometimes an AR-15 does not. This stage begins with the shooter pulling on a helmet attached to a string that sets off a mine simulator. The shooter then crawls into this Cooper tunnel and retrieves their rifle to engage a number of paper targets. Every stick that is moved incurs a plus 5 second penalty. Unfortunately, I do move one of the sticks, incurring a penalty. At the end of this next tunnel, there is an activator that I activate by slamming my magazine down onto it, then moving on to other targets, then coming back to the moving target. The targets on the left here I engage one-handed because of the weird angle inside the tunnel. I then go prone, engaging this last moving target. I was 19th out of 41 shooters in Armored Division with 46.60% of the winner's score. On this stage, the shooter begins by engaging several targets at about 50 yards. They then move on and engage 3 targets at about 100 yards. Once these arrays were completed, the shooter moves on to the rooftop prop to engage this array of targets at about 75 to 100 yards. I was 3rd out of 41 in Armored Division on this stage with 87.70% of the winner's score. I'm pretty good at shooting the AK when it comes to using it like an actual rifle. When it comes to using it like a close-range bullet hose, percentage-wise, not so much. This stage begins by using the sickle on the paper target, which activates a swinger downrange. Unfortunately, I only got one hit on that swinger, giving me a plus 5 second penalty. On such a short stage like this, that plus 5 second penalty incurs a huge reduction in point value. I ended up 17th out of 41 shooters with 50.93% of the winner's score. While a 16-second run on this stage is average at about 66% of the winner's score, adding a plus 5 second penalty to that reduces the score by about 15 match points. This stage begins with the shooter crushing a casing down to the height of a 9mm casing. Ironically, when I pulled that activator at the beginning, the magazine slid into my lap. Every magazine on this stage is loaded to only 10 rounds and has to be retrieved from the barrels on the stage. I do forget to charge the rifle here, having shot it empty until I get a click. No big deal though, I rack it quickly and get back into action. I was 11th out of 41 in armored on this stage with 69.96% of the winner's score. This stage is very simple. The shooter begins by running to retrieve their rifle and engaging this first array of steel. Once this array is engaged, the shooter then moves on to the next array to engage it. I was 6th out of 41 shooters in armored on this stage with 75.02% of the winner's score. This stage begins with the shooter dropping a simulated mortar down the tube, then crawling through this tunnel. The shooter retrieves their rifle and engages 2 plates on this plate rack, and one target at about 100 yards and another target at about 150 yards. I'm pretty pleased with myself on this stage because I go 1 for 1 on all the rifle steel. Here's the same stage, third person. One thing to point out on a stage like this is always take the closest targets first, stabilize on them before moving on to the further, harder targets. Also note, with this particular prop, my hand goes through the window, pulls back against the frame, and my thumb acts as a shelf to support the rifle. Unfortunately, this was the only other stage at the match that had any kind of intermediate range targets. When it comes to using the rifle like a rifle, again, I'm pretty darn good, finishing 2nd out of 41 in armored with 88.81% of the winner's score. This stage began engaging a couple steel targets from inside this truck, then exiting the truck and engaging the rest of these paper targets. Unfortunately, the way some of the targets appeared to the shooters changed throughout the match, and this stage was thrown out as a result. So I don't know how I did. Nonetheless, I'm going to show it to provide coverage of the complete match experience. This stage began with the rifle completely empty and the magazines completely empty inside this crate. The shooter had to load their magazines using loose ammo from inside the ammo can. The best way to do this stage was to load only 10 rounds and fire only 1 round at each of the shoot targets. If you got a failure to neutralize, just take it. The plus 5 second penalty was better than the amount of time it took to load the magazine. While I'm moving, the rear sight snags in my gear and flips up, blocking the optic. I don't realize it until I go to shoulder the rifle and don't have a sight picture. I did not choose the best way to shoot this stage. I loaded 22 rounds and took 2 shots at all of the targets. I was 23rd out of 41 in armored division with 51.37% of the winner's score. This stage begins with the shooter crawling through this tunnel. Once they clear the tunnel, they have to load and fire 1 round out of the prop gun on the stage. This initially was a bolt-action rifle, but it broke or was otherwise inoperable, and they replaced it with an AK. The shooter then retrieves their own rifle and moves through the course of fire, finishing inside the tank at the end. Inside the tank at the end, I opt to switch shoulders rather than reposition myself because of the confined space. Here's the same stage again from the third-person perspective. The foam on these bars was added after more than one shooter collided with it, injuring themselves during the course of fire. I do not blame the match or stage designers for this. Going through a stage so quickly that you risk injury to yourself is never worth it, in my opinion. I was 16th out of 41 in armored division on this stage with 61.3% of the winner's score. This stage requires that the shooter engage the corresponding colored targets from the board without touching the ground. Each target requires 3 hits. This match is one of the rare times where hits passing through a barrel or obstacle count for score. I reload on the move so I can unload on this barrel as I advance forward to the last position. As you'll see in the photo of the target, it worked quite well. This is something I wish we saw at matches more often. I was 5th out of 41 shooters in Armored Division on this stage with 72.17% of the winner's score. In the end, in Trooper category, I was 4th out of 18 competitors. In Armored Division, I was 8th out of 41 shooters with 69.29% of the winner's score. Overall, I was 34th out of 301 shooters with 70.15% of the winner's score. I'm fairly happy with how I did this year. I maintained my same 8th place position in Armored Division that I had the previous year, this year using 7.62 by 3.9 with 30 round magazines versus 5.45 with 45 round magazines the previous year. There were 2 stages that I wish I had done better on, but every match is a learning experience and I can't shoot every stage clean. All of my borrowed equipment worked great for this event. As you can see from the match footage, I didn't experience any malfunctions throughout the whole match. Thanks again to X-Tech Tactical, Xander Sporting Goods, and Lee Armory for helping making attending this match possible. The event this year had more of a festival atmosphere, with vendors set up between the stages and side matches occurring between the stages, so that shooters had something to do while they were waiting for their turn on the stage. Attendance at this year's event was almost 100 competitors more than the previous year. This necessitated that the stages were shorter than they were in the previous 2 years this event has been held. I think to maintain the quality of the event that the number of competitors should be capped at some lower number and the stages brought back up to the duration that we saw at the 2016 and 2017 matches. I'd also like to see more stages with targets at 50 to 250 yards to fully test the capability of the AK and other comm-block rifles. With those things in mind, I still had fun attending this event and using equipment that's outside the realm of what I normally compete with. If you're a comm-block weapons aficionado, Red October is definitely worth checking out, whether as a spectator or as a competitor, particularly if you make use of all the side events that are going on and take the opportunity to visit with the vendors that are making products specifically for this segment of the firearms market. Thank you for watching, and come back again for more match and multi-gun competition content.